Welcome back to JoJo Bizarre Adventure Anime Review, Episode 58. Excuse me. Well, it's been a few years since I last this review series. Of course, last time I reviewed Stone Ocean. Yep, an excellent part that had one of the most bizarre endings I have ever seen for JoJo. Yeah, it was also the first one since part 1 where the main character dies toward the end of it. Well, in the case of part 1, he died in the last episode. In that one, Jolene died in the penultimate episode. And that's not the anime's fault. That's the manga's fault for that. But interesting thing with Stone Ocean, that was also the last part, well, of course, of the first 6 that was adapted. That was the last one for the manga version of it. That was last one released weekly. Yep, after 15 years, the writer switched from weekly to monthly, and it's been that way since then. Started in 1987, switched to monthly in 2003. So for 23 years, he's going to release 3 parts. And this one is basically adapting the first of those 3, Steel Bull Run. Unlike the first 6 that take place in the same universe, not Part 7. Part 7, Part 8, and Part 9 take place in a completely different universe. Yes, the first episode also has nods to other parts. We'll get to that. So, in case you're curious, how long is Part 7? 95 chapters. Really? For a monthly part, that's like about 8 years. Yep, 8 years. And this episode mostly adapts the first 5 chapters. There's actually one character in this episode where they pretty much almost cut almost everything related to him. So, first episode is called Steel Bull Run, which is also the 191st episode of the series. Yeah, and unlike the previous parts, which were like about 20 minutes, like even part 1 was like that, even part 6 was like it too. This first episode was about 50 minutes, almost an hour long. I'm like, damn. And they kept 5 chapters this thing. Well, in case you're curious, the first chapter was 53 pages. So we start off with one character named Sandman, who is Native American Indian, who is running from his own tribe. You're like, what the heck is going on here? Why is he running? They cut out basically the opening part of the chapter. Yeah, basically what they cut out here is that he was caught having books in English. So he was declared a traitor of the tribe, and his chief ordered him to be scalped. I'm like, scalping is something that people who are white do to Native Americans. It's just something I've heard. And they chase him for a while, and then he just disappears. He falls down a hole, looks at Steel Run, and then they go straight to where Mr. Steel, the guy who runs the race, we see him next, because everything like the Sandman of this episode was complete excise, like all of his backstory and all the excess of him. Yeah, they cut it out pure for time. And then we see them announcing the Steel Bull Run race, where he has a press conference. They kind of rearrange a bit here, where they had the press conference first, and then the stuff happened. They kind of rearrange here. So they had press conference, like they show up the actual route. The fact it's going to be like, I think it's like 3,700 miles. And it starts in San Francisco, and it wraps up in New York City. Now you're probably thinking, San Francisco, California, right? You think, oh, straight line. Not necessarily. Excuse me. Basically, it's this. They go, ooh, like down, and they go straight up to Michigan, come down for a bit, and then kind of go all the way around straight to New York City. Oh, there's also a girl named Lucy Steele who's there too. Now, when the dubcast about when this episode was released dub, which is kind of unusual for now, the only series I've been reviewing I've reviewed recently where the dub was released the same day from Netflix. was Rama half. This first one, the second one then. So then they we had this Baron who actually is going to drive a car. Yes, drive a car. You are thinking, wait, a car? I thought those weren't heavily advanced until the early 20th century. Well, that is not entirely true. They actually started in the UK, and they're right over here. Baron just was allowed to use it. So it was like, oh, maybe the race could be a failure. That's not going to happen. Then we see the promoter crying into, I think it's either his wife or his daughter's arms. Actually trying her chest, like, oh, I think it might fail. And then we see a man named JoJo Zeppeli. Yes, the character is probably this world's version of Baron Zeppeli from Part 1. Like, essentially put, Part 7 is a loose remake of Part 1. Kind of, except it's a different country, and there's all these stone masks, and it involves, basically the best way you can describe Part 7, it was the creator's excuse to give the original Joestar a stand. Except that his name is not Jonathan Joestar, it's Johnny Joestar. Where you see him like, oh, he registers, apparently it's $120 with coins. But he holds back a couple because one guy was trying to touch his balls. No, not the balls with his legs. He has like these 2 steel balls. That's basically the whole title of the thing of him. Hate time touching, of course, he's accused of stealing and then let go, and then he's shot. And then we also see this guy called Johnny Joestar who is paralyzed from the waist down. And they actually did go into this guy's backstory of why it's like that. So they show that his father basically owns a ranch. So, like the kid John Joestar comes from a very wealthy family. And he's like a jock, and his brother was like a two. Brother died because of that. And then, of course, so apparently Johnny was rude. And he had a girl who looked very similar to the girl him being his wife in Part 1. Where actually, she does show up and she doesn't really interact, but the character is a nod to that. Except that he's acting here like very arrogant at first, which has been unusual for a Joestar to do, because Joestars are usually pretty decent people. They're not arrogant first and just basically get comments later. It's almost like he's acting like Dio Brando. Kind of. And speaking of Dio Brando, Patrick Stoltz is the director of this one. Yes sirree. And there is a Dio here, except he's called Diego Brando. I'll get to him later. So, we see that the guy who had been there since, like, oh, I think he cut in line, so he had forced him away, and he comes back and he shoots Johnny in the back, paralyzing him. And then he's taken to the hospital where, for some random reason, his hospital room, I get the fact it's the 19th century, but it looks like a freaking jail cell, and his nurse is a guy who was also trying to drain blood from his foot. Yeah, this was really weird. Now, yes, this happened in manga. They basically kind of try to... They spin up the scene a tiny bit in the anime, where... And also, this nurse tried to murder him by sticking up a newspaper in his mouth. Try to suffocate him that way. And then we see, oh, he's in a wheelchair now, and then, of course, he sees, Zeppeli with the ball, try to touch it. Of course, he can kind of move a bit, and, of course, he chases down a little bit later. It's like, and then we see where he tries to set up for the race. Basically, the anime kind of puts the scenes more of a more chronological order, per se, because if anyone's read the manga version of this, it's like, bam, this. It seems like stuff is like happening here and there. Here it's more. It's like they take sections of these scenes from these chapters and basically present it in a more cinematic way, which I thought was really cool here. And later we see him trying to ride a horse. Well, he's trying to get out of one, but after a while he does get on the horse. So, and then we see the race start. Before we have the day of the race after 2 days. So he gets there, Zeppeli gets there, and then we see Abdal. You think, wait, why is Abdal here? Isn't he dead? Well, okay, so this guy is a nod to Abdal. They didn't mention, oh, he's from the Far East. They don't mention India here, so he's from the Far East. Now, in case you're curious though, did the anime change the attire to make it purposely look like his outfit he wore from Part 3? Oh no. That actually happened in manga too. And then we are introduced to, it says on his hat Dio, but his name is pronounced Diego Brando. And he's from the United Kingdom. Just like the original was. And we see a guy pick a look who overslept. And we see that he apparently signed up after being like lazy for counting clouds. It's like he's a version of Shikamaru. So he just signs up and because he wants to get rich. And then they have the race get started here. And they're just racing across. And it takes Johnny a while to get on his horse. And eventually he does. He's not interested in winning. He's more basically proving man to get the ball so he can walk in. So they race for a while. By the way, Sam himself pops up again later on in the episode where he's seeing him register. And he doesn't have a horse, but he runs anyways. Now, you probably think, that's kind of weird. How do you go from the hole to here? They cut out a lot of the stuff here. They probably will say it maybe for a future episode. Who knows? So they're running along, and the local guy, he rides into the woods with his eyes closed. Like, that's quite dangerous to do. He's above the tree branches, and they come across basically a canyon. And some of the riders are not risking the horse to cross this canyon. So, but Sam ends up crossing no problem. And Loco crosses it too, but he's told, oh, get a lasso. He does basically have a lasso. The girl skip. And then, of course, the episode ends with of course, Johnny trying to almost catch up with Zeppeli. And we also see, like, hot air balloons watching this. We see of course, they're watching from a train, obviously. And that's kind of happens over the course of almost 50 minutes. Long episode. Yes, and I thought we'd have time for more episodes tonight, but sadly put, basically, it's getting kind of late. Because I had to get up 6 a.m. tomorrow to go to work at 7. Yes. So, I'm going to call it a night here. So, it looks like I'm going to save Trigon Stargaze and Case Close for tomorrow, along with Project Red and Kamen Rider Zex. And I keep thinking to myself, am I eventually going to go back to 01? Maybe. Just maybe. I'll probably end up watching a couple of the anime tomorrow while probably while I'm at work. Yeah. So that's pretty much a particular video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, notifications. I will see you all tomorrow. Okay, thanks you. Bye.